So next up, we're going to be diving into federal digital transformation and what's next on the horizon. Please welcome Lauren Hayes, Senior Advisor for Technology and Innovation at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, Chris Brazier, Acting Deputy IT Director at the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, Sean Brune, Chief Information Officer and Deputy Commissioner for Systems at the Social Security Administration, Kevin Corcoran, Principal at Deloitte, and Dan Wallace, Area Vice President of the Federal Civilian Business at ServiceNow.
Great. Well, hey, everyone. Welcome to Fed Forum. Excited to see so many people here today. Before we jump into the questions, I'd like to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves. Lauren, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's wonderful to see everyone. My name is Lauren Boas Hayes, and I'm with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA as we call it. Prior to joining the federal government, I led cybersecurity for the Biden-Harris transition team, which was a fantastic opportunity to get to learn about all of the incoming administration appointees and nominees. And then prior to that, I was in the private sector where I focused on counter-disinformation and counter-espionage. Excited to be here with everyone today.
Good morning, everybody. Sean Brune, I'm the CIO at the Social Security Administration. In that role, I've served there for the last 3 years as CIO, but majority of my career at Social Security has been in field operations. I see my function as trying to build synergy across the C-suite so that we can actually accelerate our transformation of service.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Chris Brazier. I'm the Acting Deputy IT Director for Defense Threat Reduction Agency, also known as DTRA. And I promise I'm not trying to do job, I got the most jobs in the house. I'm also the Chief Technology Officer, and I'm also the Mission IT Infrastructure and Services Department Chief. So it gives me a great opportunity to take a look at across the agency from an operational perspective. So happy to be here this morning with you. Thank you. Great.
Hi, good morning. My name is Gary Novotny. I'm at the Central Intelligence Agency, helping to implement ServiceNow there. Before that, I was at the ODNI, Office of Director of National Intelligence, where I was doing something very similar there. Must have done something right or something wrong, I don't know. So I came over to CIA then. And got to see two different agencies implementing this platform.
Good morning, everyone. Kevin Corcoran, Principal for Deloitte, Lead Alliance Partner for the Americas. So I'm responsible for both our commercial and public sector work across the Western Hemisphere.
Great. Thank you all for joining us this morning. So I'll open with a question for everyone. Under the 2021 Presidential Management Agenda, the Biden administration backed federal digital acceleration and improved citizen services with a focus on both customer experience and service delivery. How far along are federal agencies in implementing these specific requirements?
Yeah, happy to start us off. So I can speak for how we're thinking about this at CISA. So if you are not familiar with CISA, that would be reasonable because we are the youngest agency in government. We were just created about 4 years ago. We celebrated our 4th birthday in November. And so one of the benefits that we have at CISA as a very young agency is we haven't inherited quite the same level of tech debt that some other agencies have experienced. And so that's a tremendous benefit to us as we get to operate in a slightly different way. We also know that our mission, being the nation's cyber defense agency, requires us to take an incredibly technology-centric approach as an agency. And so when we think about some of the areas in which service delivery and really putting customer voice at the center and holding government accountable to doing that well are critical to our mission, I think about an area I focus on a lot in my day-to-day job, which is cyber incident reporting. We know that understanding the cyber threat landscape is critical to our understanding of national security. But to do that, it means that we need presently to get voluntary incident reporting to our agency, and then in the future, under the new the CERCIA bill, the incident reporting bill, we will have some element of regulatorily required reporting to CISA. So we know that to do that well, we need to make it easy for individuals and organizations to report incidents to us. And we need to do that in keeping in mind that individuals and organizations who are reporting to us are operating under duress because they've just experienced a major cyber incident. And so that's one of the areas where we're thinking a lot about how we make engagement with CISA easy from a technology perspective, from a process perspective, and then we've got to make sure that we use those cyber incident reports to also inform the nation and make sure that we're making better national security decisions.
Appreciate that.
I would just add that at Social Security, we're a high-touch public agency. Nearly everybody in the country is going to interact with Social Security at some point, whether to get a Social Security number card, report wages, file for benefits, or receive benefits. And as such, I would say we've always been customer experience focused, but the recent executive order and the other administration guidance, Lauren mentioned security, there's been an executive order on that as well, diversity, equity, access, and inclusion. Those are part of things that we're doing at Social Security to make our programs better meet the needs of the public we serve. Some of the specific things we're doing is focusing on our journey mapping to make sure that we're seeing where the customer pain points are and addressing them. And then, as was heard on the last panel, similar to VA, we have an always-on survey to hear the voice of the customer and actually take action based on their comments.
Yeah, so Defense Threat Reduction Agency is a little bit different, right? So we're not public facing. So our customers are really, actually my customers in my perspective is the entire agency and then all the combatant commands that we actually service and help out with counter weapons of mass destruction and nuclear proliferation, really I can say it. And it's different. So our thing is really how do we help them transform to getting information and data that's going to be helpful to them? How do we increase that exchange of data and information between either combatant commands, our 5I partners, or within our own directorates within our own agency today? So that's primarily our big focus on doing that kind of transformation within our agency.
Yeah, very similar. Our customers are internal. That's where our citizens are internal. So we have a little bit of tech debt. I'm very jealous that you don't have a lot of tech debt. We're a little bit older agency. So, but we've been on this journey a lot, sooner than the 21 memorandum. So we've been much like Sue Gordon said. I mean, we were out in front of this, digitizing things,
Sure.
Prior to this. So it's just trying to take a look at that technical debt and cleaning that up.
I think Gary's being very humble. His organization is really on the vanguard of digital transformation, and I think there's a lot of lessons learned there. But in contrast, I think it's a tale of two cities. You have some organizations that still have not adopted the transformation agenda, but I think all the leaders on this panel are really in the vanguard of really driving digital transformation, accelerating speed, scale, and insight. And I think that's really remarkable, considering the resource constraints they may have, some of the authoritative constraints that they have, regulatory constraints that they have, and they've done an absolute wonderful job navigating through that to drive results.
That's a good point, Kevin. And I wonder, from your perspective, as a system integrator that goes out to support the federal agencies, how do you look at some of these presidential management agenda topics that come out, specific to this one maybe?
So we view it as table stakes. It's a requirement for each of our customers that we partner with. We drive towards meeting the agenda requirements, but then we also challenge where we can, because as Sue mentioned, we have to challenge norms. We have to drive transformation, and with that is going to come some challenges, and we have to have the fortitude and the partnership to really drive that transformation and change.
Great. Let's continue on the digital acceleration journey. And John, I'll ask you a question, and we'll talk about no-code, low-code. It's a topic, and I think you may be able to help us understand the differences, the benefits of the no-code, low-code applications, development tools that are out there, and the platforms. How does SSA look at that?
Sure. Well, I'm sure many are in the audience are familiar with the use of such platforms. And it really is a possibility for the platform to reduce the amount of application programming. Instead of relying on complex programming languages, both low-code and no-code platforms offer visual interfaces, allow drag and drop capability building, and then link those capabilities together. You have applications that can be deployed to meet customer needs. From the Social Security point of view, we look at this as providing a couple opportunities, but also some challenges that have to be balanced. Some of the opportunities include perhaps, we have a lot of code in production already, perhaps reducing the amount of code we have to maintain by relying on maintenance and upgrade of the platform. Perhaps low-code, no-code can help us get to enablement with proper training and looking at good use cases, enablement of business developers who are closer to the problems that are causing our customers pain, and that those folks who are actually doing the interface with the customer day to day, interviewing the public in our case, they might have more insight into how to streamline the workflow. And if we give them tools to automate that streamlined workflow, could be a big advantage for both our customer and our agency. One other advantage I would mention is that by enabling the citizen developer, as I just described, we can then focus our software engineers on other, maybe more complex or different challenges than the customer interface automated workflow. Some of the things we try to balance, it's really important from our perspective to have good governance in place so that as we deploy these tools, we're doing them with creativity and innovation, but also in a standards-based methodology, particularly when it comes to prioritization. What use cases get attention first and then latter. So we've focused our initial work on low-code, no-code, really in building the guidance and governance to really use the platforms wisely.
You hit on something in governance. I spend a lot of time talking with CIOs. And when you talk about no-code, low-code development tools and platforms, they talk about the idea of creating shadow IT, that these applications are going to create sprawl on the back end of the organization. How do you work through some of those concerns that SSA might have as you give the ability for other folks within the organization to develop applications?
Sure. One of our primary strategies at Social Security is focus on the IT part first. There's plenty of IT administrative functions, IT operations, management, et cetera, that we can improve using automated processes. That gives us an advantage of learning the platforms well and deeply before it broadens across the enterprise. It also gives us the advantage of buying some time to work with our business colleagues to socialize and train how the platforms may be used. And then, finally, they can see the platform in use before they try to make advantage of it.
I appreciate that.
One of the things I'm happy that he said was, configuration management, which is governance, right? You said governance. So configuration management, so if I look at what we're doing, like infrastructure as a service, or infrastructure as code, right? We're sending that out, and it's great because now you have a predictable set that's going out there, building your servers and services that we don't have to worry about that, and you can focus those teams on more important tier 3, tier 4 type problems. So yeah, I agree with you. I'm with you on that.
Any other thoughts from the panel before we jump on to the next question?
I'm sorry.
No, I think it's spot on. When we think about configuration management, it's absolutely critical that you have a solid foundation, as Gary and others know. If you do not establish that CMDB, you do not rationalize your environment, you do not have the right governance in place, you are going to start experience that technical sprawl. But I think all of these organizations that you represent really have wrestled the governance to the ground and driven a clear, consistent vision in your organizations, and that's one of the keystones to success.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Chris, I'll bring it back to you. How vital is digital transformation to deter WMD and other attacks, and what are some of the next generation measures that you're taking in the digital arena?
So it's huge for us, right? So right now, we're kind of on the forefront of what's going on in Europe, but for us, digital transformation is, I'd say it's a holistic change across the board. Right now, everything is data, 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 data. So, it's like, what does that data look like? How are we going to ingest that data? How are we going to transform that data? How are we going to make sure that data, the provenance of the data is true and correct? So that way we're giving all of our combatant commands and our customers the right information at the right time across the board. So it's also, BI, dashboards, and everything else that we're looking at as well. So for us, it's huge. And I think, as we kind of explore AI, ML, DS, right, how can we help transform this agency from internal and align with our director's planning guidance, which is really, she wants to share the data with all of our partners and our combatant commands and our 5I partners. It's how do we help her get to that arena? And it's really, one, understanding our data, understanding what the data means, understanding the taxonomy of that data, and then coming up with a higher level of like what makes sense to us as an agency, and then what also makes sense for us to send out to our customers and what makes sense with them. We have a lot of engagements with all of the 11 or 12 commands and our 5I partners to ensure that we're going down that right path. There is, also internally, right, we're trying to break down those silos of excellence. There's multiple people doing multiple different projects. So how do we pick best of breed to put that out there for everybody? And I think we're making great strides in that to ensure that we are picking the best, so that way our digital transformation is just not another silo of excellence. Right. It's actually that is cross-cutting across our agency.
Cool. Anybody want to piggyback off of Chris's feedback on that question? Gary, I see you ready to go.
Breaking down those silos. I mean, the silos of excellence. I mean, we all see it, and it's hard when you have a large organization to try to break those down. And but I think we need to be on the leading edge of breaking those down using platforms like this.
And I think one of the things that is hugely important when you're doing any kind of transformation is everybody kind of focuses on the tech. I'm going to focus more on leadership. Leadership meaning that as a leader, I need to give my teams permission to fail. And I was just, I'm part of the Federal CIO Innovation Committee, and one of the things that I had heard from Claire, the Federal CIO, which was, a no blame post-mortem. So if you fail, right, it's done. Let's just talk about what failed and how we're going to correct it to go forward. But those failures are the only way that we're actually going to learn to know what not to do in the future. So I think that's hugely important as well as a leader, to allow our teams to fail and allow our teams to succeed and ensure that we give them the appropriate backing as a leader.
And you bring up a really important point about enabling mission critical outcomes. It's not just about the architecture and the technology, it's really driving your outcomes. That's why this is such a good partnership and fit.
And you touched on data sharing and the enormous challenge of managing all of the data that we have today in our modern environments. And at CISA, we work with all of the federal CISOs and CIOs who are responsible for their agency's cybersecurity, but then we also have a challenge of needing to try to bring some of that data together to understand threats that are happening to each agency, but also across the federal civilian executive branch. And some of the things that we really think of as being sort of forward-leaning in this space is thinking about how do we actually provide the services that other agencies need, especially smaller agencies who may not have the same depth of security staff or IT support. How do we, CISA, actually take some of that burden off of those agencies to provide those services directly, so that it's not just data sharing, it's a mutual accountability for that data and for the security of those systems.
And I would just add that whether we're talking about protecting the country from external threat or gathering intelligence or protecting our cyber assets, or in our case, serving the public, data is, I think you heard from all of us, the lifeblood or the fuel that keeps that transformation going. Good data governance, clear data access, the importance of the data infrastructure can't be oversold in my estimation.
Great, appreciate that. Lauren, CISA, digital transformation is at the forefront of what you're doing to safeguard the American public, our infrastructure, our institutes. Your organization recently announced a support services contract for 5 years, $200 million. What are some of the other measures that you're taking today along this digital transformation journey?
Absolutely. So one of the topics that the entire cybersecurity community is focused on, and certainly that's a top priority for CISA, that requires enormous transformation of how we think about security, is zero trust. So historically, with traditional networks, we had this trust but verify model, where a user was inside the network and you were a trusted entity. One of the challenges, enormous challenges here, is that it really put a lot of the onus on the end user. And candidly, when things went wrong, this could lead to situations where actually the end user was blamed for actions that were taken. When we think about a lot of the guidance around what happens when you click on a phishing link, or what happens if your credentials should be exposed and no longer in your control. And so this focus on moving towards zero trust is really an enormous transformation for organizations to undertake. but it's also an enormous transformation of how we think about the responsibility for security of an organization. And so shifting that from the trust but verify approach to instead thinking about continuous authentication, really making sure that we have segmentation inside organizations that can really contain the impacts of an incident when they occur, and really shifting that and transforming both our technical implementations, but also how we think about the responsibility of security and where we think about the end user's role in that.
Great. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to say, within DoD, right, it's not just zero trust, it's lining up all of those different ideas and architecture. So it's not only zero trust, it's joint all domain control to JADC2, right? So we have that, we have our software factories as well. So it's lining up all that so that way we ensure that we are, in alignment with zero trust, and we're providing, great value to the JADC2 concept from an enterprise architecture standpoint. And then again, giving our citizens, which is for us, right, those in uniform and DoD civilians, exactly what they need at the right time and securely.
And ServiceNow is really great in helping you with the provenance of your data within your enterprise. So that, coupled with governance and zero trust, is a real winning combination.
That's a great point. Kevin, I'm going to stick with you. Let's jump into the employee experience. How can the employee experience empower the government workforce as part of the federal digital transformation agenda? What impact might it have on attracting talent in a competitive labor market?
Sure. I mean, if we look at the digital native economy now, the expectations for the consumer-grade experience at the enterprise is absolutely critical. Everyone here knows they have challenges hiring, into the workforce. So we got to take public service and ServiceNow and give them a rich user experience. It's like Bill said, we got to make work easier. We got to give them rich digital experiences so then they can serve their constituents, their citizen, the citizen provider, the citizen developer component as well. It has to be an engaging, impactful experience for the user, for the provider. If we don't do that, we lose in the attention economy. If we're losing in the attention economy, you're going to get that drift away from your mission impact. Everyone in this panel is tasked with accomplishing critical mission activities. Everyone is committed to the mission. We have to help them accomplish that mission in the most seamless way and really drive impact within their organizations. Because if there's too much friction, we know it's gonna be too hard, it's gonna impact adoption, it's gonna slow down transformation, and it's gonna slow down scaling in your organization. So those rich, seamless experiences are absolutely critical to success, which then in turn talks to the last point around retention. If you're fulfilled in your mission impact and how you're delivering services, you're going to have a higher level of job satisfaction, and that's going to positively impact retention.
Yeah, I would add, we have this enormous labor need in the cybersecurity community, right? Every organization is experiencing this, to include CISA and the entire federal government. And so when we think about also this unfortunate experience that many tech workers are having as the recent layoffs have occurred, we at CISA are trying to think, how do we make government the right and most desirable place for those employees to want to go next with their career? We know that there are an enormous number of people right now with skills that are valuable and could contribute to defending our nation. How do we make it such that the federal government is an attractive place for those people to come and support our cybersecurity mission? And that comes down to a lot of what you were just speaking about. Not only having good employee experience, but really having those modern tools, access to data, and flexible environments so that people who are self-starters and have tremendously valuable skills view the government as a place where those skills can thrive and really be put to best effect.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. I think that, if I'll do like the old college thing or basic training thing, look to your left, look to your right. We're in competition with each other across the board for the exact same talent pool, right? So, I mean, I've been ghosted, a multitude of times on hiring, where somebody gets hired and they take final offer letter, like, yeah, I found something a little bit better. I think the key thing, again, I'll go back to leadership, and it's up to us as leaders and supervisors to ensure that we're providing that experience and understanding that each employee is unique and different, and that we need to provide, that unique and different experience for each of those employees. And it could be telework, right? Everybody's like, oh, I can telework 100% of the time. I'm like, yeah, I can't, because we work across multiple different enclaves, so it's impossible. But how do we get to that point of them saying yes? Instead of the old way of, supervision and management, which was just do it my way, and that's the way it's going to be done, because that's the way we've always done it, we need to change our mantra. Again, to me, it's up to the leadership to change that experience within that organization and within their specific work unit.
Good leadership, focus on mission, customer satisfaction, right? I mean,
Yeah.
And you get to customer satisfaction through employee experience
Yep.
there.
Yep.
No doubt. No, I agree with you. Gary, we're going to close it out with you. And we're going to talk about a topic. I don't think you can pick up a technical article today without hearing about hyperautomation. It's vital to the next phase of digital transformation. And it's the idea of automating as many IT and business processes as possible. Why is hyperautomation increasingly a strategic imperative for organizations, and where does the federal government stand in an effort to incorporate hyperautomation into its innovation agenda?
At the agency, it's all about getting the officer back to mission. So, and I'm sure you can all agree at Social Security Administration, at DITRA, it's about getting the officer back to mission. And what that means is you don't want the officer searching around for answers to commonly asked questions. You don't want an officer looking for, where's that portal? How do I request this widget or this service? And, it also not being on the telephone with the tier 1 help desk on hold, only to be transferred somewhere else to try to get an answer to your questions. So hyperautomation is automating a lot of these processes, whether it's using a knowledge base, whether it's using an AI ML, it's automating those processes to get the officer back to mission. And the second thing is we've all seen there's budget cuts. We've been talking about resource issues. And again, when you automate processes and get the officer to the mission, whether it's a support mission or actually on the front lines, automating these processes helps the customer experience, gets that person back to mission. So a couple of examples at the agency of where we've been using hyperautomation is our human resources department. So they were one of the trailblazers with ServiceNow at the agency. They were an early adopter, and they set out a strategic roadmap of about 90, whether they were manual processes or processes that were done with legacy IT, and created a strategic roadmap. And over the years, they have automated or hyper-automated about 40 to 50 of those processes using ServiceNow. So what may have taken a few days or even a week of manual processes and emails and telephone calls is down to just a few clicks of the button, realistically a few clicks of the button. And hyper-automation is here to stay. And when you keep saying hyper-automation, it's like a drinking game. Every time you say it, you gotta take a drink. But with artificial intelligence, machine learning, I've heard my seniors say it, that you shouldn't be afraid of machine learning taking your job. Whether it may take a task or something that you were doing, I've heard it a million times. There are plenty of jobs and plenty of tasks and initiatives to go around. As long as the officer's willing to broaden their base and do something different, we shouldn't be afraid of automation and artificial intelligence and machine learning, because you could just broaden your base, do something. There's plenty of work to go around. I've heard that many times, because it's here to stay. It's going to continue to increase across the government, and I think, though, in general, it helps that end user.
As you were going through your technical journey and identifying those 90 different tasks that could be automated, how did you prioritize, and which ones did you focus on first?
I think Sue Gordon talked about quick wins before. So you want some quick wins up front, right? You get that buy-in. Because people are resistant to change, So you get those quick wins, you automate things, you get that satisfaction, and it's just like a snowball. And then, you maybe take on some hard ones, those critical ones that are going to make a huge impact, but maybe a little harder, and just really think about it strategically. You don't want to jump in too fast. You want to really take a look and make sure you have that O&M tail as well, because these have a tail on it. So quick wins. Take some high impact and just continue that journey.
I appreciate that.
I'm just shocked at the resistance to the change. My 20 years of government, I've never seen that before.
Great.
I would just add on hyperautomation, like Gary mentioned at the agency, Social Security has accumulated missions over time, and that has added technical debt and added legacy IT that has to be cared and maintained and secured. Hyperautomation sometimes gives the opportunity to connect some of those value points in new ways that provide the better customer experience and allows us to execute core mission responsibility better than in the past. It's building upon what I mentioned earlier, you got to have good governance and good data in the pipeline, but if you can connect those value points, maybe you can change the customer experience for the better.
Appreciate that. Any other thoughts before we close out?
I was just going to say, in a resource-constrained, employee-constrained environment, AI, ML-driven workflows levers up those key employees, those key team members, those key case officers. So the greater efficiency you can drive through those automations will have tremendous dividends in your organization.
That's a great point. Focus back on the mission, so appreciate that. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I want to thank everybody that's out in the audience today for attending this event. Hopefully you enjoy the rest of the day, and appreciate it. Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.